All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, last week at the Democratic National Convention, we took great notice of how the event was basically a vapid, hollow, substance-free event with some identity politics thrown in to dress it up. Not to be outdone, it appears now that the Republican National Convention wants to do exactly the same thing, perfectly demonstrating how neither party at this critical juncture in our history wants to score one of the most obvious and yet missing political victories in a generation. The speakers at the convention include people like Senator Tim Scott, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, Charlie Kirk, Senator Rand Paul, Governor Kristi Noem, members of Congress, Dan Crenshaw, Elise Stefanik, Lee Zeldin. Basically, every single person I just listed there is an economic libertarian who would not be out of place at a Republican National Convention that was nominating one Senator Mitt Romney. So what exactly has happened here? Why is Rand Paul, who actively opposed Trump in the primary and is currently fighting hard to make sure that Congress does not pass an economic relief bill, get to take that stage, while Senators Marco Rubio and Josh Hawley, who have fought hard to deliver relief to working Americans in this crisis, are absent? Why is Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida not on the list, who before the crisis began was one of the most popular Republican governors in the country? A bright, shining example of what exactly a non-orthodox, more populist-minded governor might look like in the future of the GOP. In the House of Representatives, Congressman Jim Banks has targeted China. Congressman Mike Gallagher has appeared here on this show to protect American infrastructure from Huawei. Congressman Ken Buck recently took big tech companies to task for having too much market power. And if administration officials are going to speak like Kellyanne Conway and Jaron Smith, why is Peter Navarro not on the stage when he's the only person who believed in Trump from the beginning and whose trade message vaulted him to the White House in 2016? What we see instead is what we saw in the years before Trump. Even worse, literally every single night of the convention will feature a speaker who was born in a socialist or communist country like Venezuela or Cuba to remind Americans of what will happen if Joe Biden is elected to office. You really can't make this stuff up. It's economic libertarianism, it's socialism sucks, cultural grievance, a message so designed to lose, it's like it was assembled in a political laboratory. And look, despite how old school the convention is, Republicans are going to try something new. They're going to try and be Democrats, but light, with a bizarre and insincere and insecure attempt at using identity politics and using a diverse array of women and people of different races to cover up a zombie ideology. That's not even me saying this. They've basically admitted it. Politico reporting, quote, Republicans say they're looking to highlight minority and female office holders during the convention. Just like at the DNC, when Elizabeth Warren has BLM blocks behind her, if she doesn't do anything to follow through on that via policy, it doesn't mean anything. The RNC speakers lineup is not altogether bad. There are some additions which would not be there without Trump, like Angel Moms or the widow of fallen former officer David Dorn. But in totality, there is no agenda put forward to defend the voters that the party claims to. This is a party unserious about governance, unserious about actually wanting to make America great again, and seems much more content to whine about liberals, take social conservative votes for granted, and refuse to deliver on pretty much anything for its voters. It's truly striking just how similar the lineup is to that of a substance-free DNC, with only Trump himself, with only the ability to change the tone if he so chooses in his speeches. The decision overall to elevate voices like Crenshaw, Charlie Kirk, and others as the so-called rising stars of the Republican Party, while giving the cold shoulder to Hawley, DeSantis, Rubio, and even well-established senators like Ted Cruz, tells me that if Trump loses, the party has made its choice. They will claim the mantle of Trumpism to mean capital gains tax cuts, minor cultural grievances, trying to be some light version of the Democratic Party. Socially liberal, fiscally conservative, as we like to joke in my circles. They would like nothing less than for Trump to lose and to operate under a Joe Biden presidency, where they could do what they do best, nothing. Obstruct, oppose, never offer a positive vision for America as to what a better society may and should look like coming out of one of our greatest national trials in nearly a century. But as sad as this whole thing is, there is a glimmer of hope, very small one. And as hard as they will try to say that Trump was an aberration, that his legacy means that the way you really win is to talk about socialism sucks and free market all the time, they can't hide his 26th victory from history. Trump in many ways has not worked out the way that so many Americans wanted his presidency to, but he at the very least opened the door. He showed future Republicans there is a way. As Ross Douthat of the New York Times writes, quote, Trump's successors would learn 2 lessons from his rise. First, the Republican voters aren't necessarily wedded to the ideological nostrums about Republican primary by running, as Trump did, against elements of movement conservative orthodoxy. Second, that the sustained failures of the establishment center creates a practical need for a policy agenda that's populist in the best sense, would defend and rebuild the decaying America that exists outside of the coastal metropoles, the tech hubs, and university towns. This agenda would start with ideas that Trump campaigned on in 2016 and abandoned or only half pursued, adding its watchwords would be work and family instead of you built that, with real support for wage earners and child rearers instead of hazy sentiments about entrepreneurs. And so with that last glimmer of hope, I know it's probably a little bit too optimistic, but you look at that speaker's lineup and you can really see that these are people that don't have a coherent message for what they actually want to do in a second term. It's just like the DNC. They're trying to do their own version of identity politics by, look, we've got Tim Scott and Nikki Haley and Kristi Noem and all these others. Well, what do all those people stand for? I did my radar last week. Pretty much every single one of them is an economic libertarian. So if you're trying to package the same failed orthodoxy with new faces, who cares? Why should voters care? They're going to see it as insincere and as propping up something which is not going to materially benefit their lives, and they're going to reject you with the ballot box.
Well, and the other way they're doing their own version of identity politics is with their little culture war things, the couple that waved their arms at BLM protesters and Sandman. That's the other way that they're doing identity politics.
Which I think is fine as long as it's paired with something. Look, the Dems get theirs, we get ours. We have to defend something. But we got, unless it's paired with something, then it doesn't mean anything.
And just like with the Democrats, I can't imagine anything more out of step with where most Americans are right now and the struggles of this country. And we're covering this later in the show, the millions facing eviction, the millions facing food insecurity, the fact that now without the stimulus, you have 17 million Americans who are likely to fall below the poverty line.
Right.
You have an economic catastrophe here. You don't need to put people on the stage from Venezuela and Cuba to tell us about economic catastrophe anywhere else. And it actually really reminds me of the way that Democrats in 2016 tried to run on this, the economy's great. It's amazing. It's going great. We recovered. The
greatest recovery in history.
Whatever. And meanwhile, Americans were going, really? Where? Because it's not in my household. And so it feels so off-key, both to be focusing on these little culture war skirmishes and to be focusing on Venezuela and Cuba rather than actually fixating on an agenda here at home. And look, maybe they'll do it. Maybe Trump in his speeches every night, maybe he's going to lay out and, FDR let's build it back, a type of agenda with specifics, but I'm not holding my breath there. And I'm curious what you think of Trump speaking every night. It reminds me actually of my sort of mentor in TV would always say, there's no bad ideas, only bad execution. Mm-hmm. So look, he's the star. Yeah. It could work if he came with the right message. Something tells me it's not going to end up that way.
Yeah, I don't know with him. Look, it's always worked for him to blanket TV airwaves. I'm not surprised about what he's doing. But to the broader point of whatever Trump says, if it's just Trump, it doesn't actually mean anything, right? Which is that if the larger party infrastructure, if the convention, if everybody is not actually behind that message, then what happens? Well, the Trump administration happens. So it just tells me everything. That Rand Paul, an economic libertarian who hated Trump, who has been out of step with the entire idea of Trumpism, if such a thing even exists, gets to speak. And none of the senators who have actually advanced or rethinking of American capitalism and of the way our society should be structured get a single minute. He's going to go up there, he's probably going to talk about FISA and Russiagate and Obamagate, issues, of course, dear to the heart of every swing voter in America. And meanwhile, the one senator or the other senators who propose any sort of economic assistance to American citizens are not getting allowed to speak. That tells me everything I need to know about the choice that the party has made, and I know exactly how it's going to work out. Good luck in November.
Yeah,
really.
Well said.
All right, Crystal, I'm looking forward to your radar next.